Want to bring in America's A-team, and they are a good one, huh? Is that right, English?
It is
a good one.
That's okay.
They are good. He is Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to George W. Bush. James Freeman, assistant editor, Wall Street Journal, and co-author of the book Borrowed Time. And Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio host and a Fox News contributor. How we doing? Good day to all of you. 13 days away. What happens, Brad?
I think it's going to defy history. I think it's going to be very close in the House. I think that there is a chance, better than 50-50, that Democrats take it, but I hold out hope for Republicans, and we're certainly going to keep the Senate.
All right, go across the table, James.
Republican Senate, I think, I'm looking at it as kind of a coin flip in the House. History would say they probably get just enough Democrats to take over, but I think the issues favor the Republicans this year.
Leslie.
I want to be a optimist here. Democrats are going to take the House. If nothing, just the seats in my state of California alone. If California will be completely blue. But I think it's a very narrow path and a challenging path to the Senate. I'm not sure Democrats will take it. I think Republicans might hold on.
Okay. All right, guys. So you're on the record. And you have the right to change your mind 13 times.
A lot can change between now and then. Meanwhile, we got to ask you about President Trump, saying he will probably meet with President Putin next month. This obviously would be a huge meeting to take place. What are your expectations of what would or could come out of that potential meeting?
Well, I think he set the table well. He got out of the intermediate nuclear missile treaty that was not working. The Russians had been violating it. This is something Ronald Reagan signed in the 80s after bringing the Russians to the table by deploying missiles in Europe to match theirs. Now Trump is saying, if you're not going to abide by it, we won't either. So I think it's a series of policy actions that show that he understands the threat, and I think that's the right context to meet with Putin.
Here's National Security Advisor Bolton on the nuclear deal with Russia. To you next on this.
It is the American position that Russia's in violation. It is Russia's position that they're not in violation. So one has to ask, how do you convince the Russians to come back into compliance with obligations they don't think they're violating? The threat is not American withdrawal from the INF Treaty. The threat is the Russian missiles already deployed.
Brad?
John Bolton's absolutely right. It's not whether or not we believe that they violated. We know they violated. We know it in chapter and verse. We know it in satellite photos. We know it in intelligence. They have cruise missiles in violation in places that they shouldn't be having these missiles, which is a direct threat on NATO. So John Bolton goes there. He sets the table. Remember, they're going to have more of a pull-aside meeting than a summit because both leaders will be at the 100th anniversary of World War I. Which means that will set up the table for another meeting, perhaps a summit, to discuss these heady issues, because as just pointed out, this agreement was made with the Soviet Union. Now it's Russia. It's a whole different game with Putin.
Leslie.
You're going to be surprised that I think this might be a good idea. I'm a little bit fearful of what this does as far as giving a green light to Russia with regard to the weaponry going forward, but they clearly violated it, not just now, even in the Obama administration, they said they were violating it. I think it's good, obviously, that the president meet with other world leaders like Putin, but I'm still angry, as many Americans are, that we really haven't held Putin's feet to the fire and held him accountable for what we face in a couple of weeks, which are elections. And we know that we're hearing all the time that we're still not free from the interference from that country and other countries. And I think that not just undermines our process, but it shakes the confidence.
But back to this issue, I don't think Putin saw this coming.
No. I don't think he saw it coming. I don't think he saw it coming because I think he views, from the way he speaks, a relationship with Trump that's different and better than other nations. I mean, certainly this is not Iran. This is Russia, right? You know, if you feel you violate something, you're going to pull out, or, you know, Paris Accord, it's quite different. But, you know, he is Donald Trump. That is his style, the president's style, which is, you know, this isn't working for us. You're violating it. Bye.
I would say maybe Putin should have seen it coming, because while the rhetoric from President Trump has been kind of mild toward Putin at times, saying don't worry about Putin, the actions are very tough, and it's a series of moves basically making it harder for Vladimir Putin and his regime, whether it's encouraging American energy production, giving Ukrainians the weapons to defend themselves. There's a pattern here in the Trump administration of raising the cost of Putin's expansionism.
The problem is the collusion has been discovered. It's between Trump and Pompeo and Bolton. We found it.
That's right. Look, Democrats want us to believe that somehow Putin is playing Trump. It's quite the opposite. I mean, I think Trump is playing Putin. His rhetoric may be more subdued than other leaders, but his actions, his sanctioning, this now with the violation of a major arms treaty, if anything, I think Putin has greatly misjudged Trump.
Meanwhile, 13 days out, the conversation of civility continues in this country. And we all remember a few days ago, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his wife out dining out at a restaurant, and they were confronted and accosted by some who oppose his views and the views on the right. Well, Mitch McConnell has decided to pen an op-ed. It was published in the Courier Journal op-ed, Courier Journal. He wrote this op-ed talking about that incident in the restaurant, which you're looking at now, as an example of, quote, the antics of far-left protesters and extremist left-wing tantrums. He says, quote, I'm not sure exactly what in my career suggests I would be easily swayed by such a spectacle. The reality is simple. I will not be intimidated, but this issue is not really about me or about any individual elected official. It's about something larger, the mob mentality that is being systemically fed and encouraged by the far left all across our nation. Leslie, if I could get you to respond to that first.
You know, I'm on the left, and I get so upset, quite frankly, with that mob mentality. I think a lot of the rhetoric that's come from the president since he campaigned and since he's taken office have fanned the flames of what people thought at one time and put into action on both sides of the aisle. I don't think this is the way to go about being angry and being against a politician, whether you're on the left or the right. A person has a First Amendment right to do it, and certainly Senator McConnell has the right to have dinner. We need to vote, and that is where the power lies, left or right.
Were you okay with that confrontation? Is that the right way to
No, I don't feel that's the right way. I feel that you should take out your anger on a politician by voting in the politicians that you feel will represent what you want and where you see the country going. But this anger is very real, and which is why you hear things like blue wave or blue tsunami. Anger from the left, not just because they're called a mob, but they often feel that the mob on the right
My
has been
sense
ignored.
is every time we get close to an election, be it a national election or a midterm, which we're facing right now, you always feel the temperature rise a lot higher in all communities. But now everybody's got a phone in their pocket.
Yeah.
And it changes.
Yeah, so maybe that's we are seeing more of these events that we might not have before. I think they're awful on both sides. I don't think we should jump to blame them on President Trump and the climate. I think President Trump is the president because of a lot of anger at other actors in politics. But the good news is these really are fringe people. And I think on both sides, obviously we do see them because of the phone videos. But we were talking about the Wall Street Journal NBC poll this week. Most Americans, the overwhelming majority do not have this vitriol, do not want to engage in this, and they think it's a problem.
With others who stood up to defend him.
Exactly.
And leave him alone. But in that op-ed, by the way, you talk about how there was a phone present, Bill, but Mitch McConnell wrote that didn't tell the whole story, that what you didn't see was the man walked into the restaurant and rushed at us, began shouting, slamming his fists on our table, causing a disruption as others tried to eat. And then we know what happened from there. Last word
on that.
My fear is that intimidation turns to violence, and I agree with what's been said here. Both sides need to ramp it down. The good news is you're right. The vast majority of Americans don't buy into this.
Well, we have some breaking news now. I mean, along the same vein, we've got a statement from Sarah Sanders on these suspicious packages. Roll it, guys. Fox News alert now. Here's the statement from Sarah Sanders from the White House a moment ago. We condemn the attempted violent attacks recently made against President Obama, President Clinton, Secretary Clinton, other public figures. These terrorizing acts are despicable, and anyone responsible will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. The United States Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies are investigating and will take all appropriate actions to protect anyone threatened by these cowards, end quote. That's the statement quickly from the White House and Sarah Sanders. So they are taking this seriously. So we got Catherine Herridge on it and more coming up shortly when we get more information on that. Okay, bring in Brad and James and Leslie on this. Let's see where it goes. You're 13 days away from an election. As I said before, the temperature rises. He makes some excellent points there, too. You know, at some point they're going to figure out, if they don't know already, whether this was a true professional or an amateur.
The good news is that these devices did not go off. The good news is there's special handling for mail that's received by a former president and first lady. So I'm sure that their attention was on high alert anyway. And what's also good news is the fact that the Secret Service procedures work. So they're going to have now a full package that has not been exploded in order to investigate, which I think Mr. Balboni will agree with me. They're much better shape having the full amount of evidence than if it were exploded.
Yeah, let's hope that it doesn't take as long to find the perpetrator or perpetrators as it did to find the Unabomber. That was the right statement from the White House, and let's hope that law enforcement is able to track them down very quickly.
To your point, the package that has the explosive device or alleged explosive device that was going to former President Barack Obama was intercepted in Washington, D.C. And talking about Ted Kaczynski, we have forensic technology that has come so far since that time. So I'm very hopeful and optimistic that they will be able to find out, not only, as you said, Bill, whether this is a professional or amateur, but who this person is because of that forensics, the handling of the package, who started to handle it, the parts that were used to assemble this explosive device.
I'm going to get to Leslie here in studio as well. You're listening to all this put together.
You know, I'm glad that Catherine brought something up that's actually very frightening. We were talking about technology in the world that we're in. You can Google, where does the former president live? You can also probably find out if somebody's going to be home, and you can also find out how to build a pipe bomb online. This doesn't mean, obviously, that this person was an amateur. We don't know. Hopefully, because they did not detonate, they were not successful in their intended goal. We also don't know if there's more than one individual involved. But I think the fact that it's happening so quickly, and certainly when the emotions are raw in this time in our country, less than 2 weeks away from this midterm election where people are angry and emotional on both sides, I think this really makes us have to take pause, which is, we are a united states, and I think we're all united, and we don't want any harm to come to anyone, even if we disagree.
Brad.